Footage you're about to watch comes out of Kazakhstan near the city of Aktau. Now stick around after the footage for an overview of the conflict. Footage from January 5th, 2022 reportedly shows anti-government protesters capturing and disarming Kazakh soldiers near Aktau. The turmoil in Kazakhstan was especially violent in the capital city of Almaty, where police claim to have killed dozens of protesters, while at least 13 security forces have been killed, 2 of which were reportedly beheaded. Government forces have reportedly arrested over 2,000 protesters, and Russia has deployed paratroopers to the nation to quell the riots in support of the Kazakh government. This is also at the request of the Kazakh government. Kazakhstan's President Tokayev stated publicly that he had told security forces to fire without warning. These protests reportedly began when the government lifted its price cap on liquefied petroleum gas, or LPG. See, LPG differs a little bit from petrol or gasoline, as we in America would call it, but that's for an entirely separate conversation. Essentially, the primary argument in the media for the start of the protests is that the removal of the price cap on LPG caused a nearly doubling in price, and a large majority of Kazakh citizens have converted to using it as their primary fuel source. What's more interesting about this, specifically in Kazakhstan, is that the unrest there also raises concerns and uncertainty relative to how conveniently it would distract Russia from Ukraine. Similar to Ukraine, Kazakhstan is a former Soviet republic. On the other side of the coin, and contrary to the situation in Ukraine, though, Kazakhstan's been ruled in the last 30 years since the collapse of the Soviet Union by autocrats whom have continued close political ties with Russia, although it still did win its independence in 1991 following the Soviet collapse. The former president Nazarbayev, whom was replaced in 2019 by Tokayev, still held a strong position in government as head of Kazakh's Security Council up until earlier this past week. He was removed as a conciliatory measure at the request of protesters. Now, Russia's interest in retaining influence and control in Kazakh likely extends to resources as well. Kazakhstan happens to be the world's top global producer in uranium, is rich in hydrocarbon and other metal deposits, and has received billions in foreign investment over the last 30 years. Russia has a very vested interest in maintaining its presence there and faces less of a worldwide fight there than they would in Ukraine. Before we move forward, I need to take a minute to thank our episode sponsor, AR-500 Armor. AR-500's lightweight polyethylene armor provides rifle protection in one of the lightest packages you could imagine. The lightweight polyethylene plates barely tip the scales at 3.5 pounds as opposed to their level 3 steel, which weighs 9.6 pounds with the optional build-up coating. Armor's always a trade-off dependent upon what you expect to encounter, and for those working near water, the PE plate's natural buoyancy can be an important asset. Staying light on the weight and heavy on the protection is an excellent trade-off, but there are always pros and cons to every kind of armor. The code FUNKER drops the price on these and just about everything else at AR-500 by a significant 27%. Now, shipping times can be a little bit steep at the moment, but the product's in such high demand that it's well worth the wait. Now let's get back to Kazakh. The situations behind face value can seem aligned with Ukraine and Kazakhstan related to Russian influence. Something to keep in mind is that the separation of ideologies between the two is vastly different at this point. Ukraine has been moving further and further towards Western democratic influence, and Kazakhstan's been keeping with historical Eastern Russian alliance. Russian intervention and further invasion in Ukraine is likely to be met with widespread backlash both from an economic sanctions perspective as well as military support to Ukraine from Western countries. On the flip side, their intervention in Kazakhstan is a protective measure to retain rather than take back, as it would be in Ukraine, their influence across their borders, and is simply going to be monitored. It's easy to see where their priorities might be focused if having to choose between the two. The split between these two nations geographically is also something of interest for those not familiar. The two countries are only about 300 miles apart. That's 480 kilometers for everybody not using freedom units. That's at their closest point. Right in the middle of those two countries is Volgograd. Volgograd is home to the Marinovka Air Base, which hosts at least a wing of Russia's Su-24 bombers. You might be familiar with Volgograd's previous name, Stalingrad. Those wondering if the unrest in Kazakhstan is likely to at least slow down the possibility of further escalation in Ukraine have a like mind with U.S. Representative Mark Green from Tennessee. Mark Green serves on the House Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committees and believes the uprising in Kazakhstan will further deter Russia from further action. Green said, "I don't see Russia with the capability of handling these two crises simultaneously. I think it will deter their ability to wage a major conflict in Ukraine." With all that in mind, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know down in the comments. That's going to be it for me today. Hit the like, hit the sub, hit the bell. Stay informed.